Friends, I want to thank you for being here today. This is sort of a momentous day in many ways, but if you notice over my left shoulder, you'll see the 3rd Precinct building burned and destroyed. It was given up by our governor. When our cops most needed support, it wasn't there. But I think it's also interesting, over my right shoulder is a building that was built in 1894. And if we think back to 1894, some of you may remember that was the Great Hinckley Fire. And in the wake of one of the worst fires that ever occurred in Minnesota, communities had to rebuild. And that's what we're doing here today. We're building bridges. This city has spoken with a clear voice. We want to defend our police, not defund them. The people have spoken. So it's with immense pleasure that I stand before you today and want to introduce Brian Peters, the Executive Director of the MPPOA, because he has an announcement to make, and I want to thank him very much. Thank you, Brian Peters.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Peters. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. We represent over 10,400 active rank and file police officers across the state of Minnesota. Look at where we're at. Over my shoulder used to be a police department. It's no longer there. Governor Walz has been missing in action during his term. We need leadership that is going to support law enforcement and not show up when it's convenient or it's an election cycle. We need leadership, and we believe Scott Jensen, the next governor, will provide that. We have serious problems, and we need serious solutions. We have to stop talking about it, and we actually have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to say thank you to Dave Titus, President of the Board of Directors for MPPOA. So here's the situation. In the last few months, we've released a 10-point program. We've called out the fact that we have got to do something for safety, but it cannot happen unless we elevate the work that our policemen and policewomen do. For too long, their work has been denigrated and hyper-criticized. We have to absolutely understand that when Ilhan Omar in 2020 said that the police are a cancer and need to be dismantled and defunded, that she was not speaking for Minneapolis. She was not speaking for Minnesota. She was not speaking for the nation. I think when we look back to what happened in May and June of 2020, what happened to our police is absolutely unconscionable. Arguably, Tim Walz is the godfather of the lawlessness that has afflicted our country. Frankly, I've been surprised that there hasn't been more sharp criticism coming from other states our way for the way that Tim Walz did not respond. He quit. He quit on the police, and they didn't want to quit. They understood that the 3rd Precinct building is far more than just bricks and mortar. It is the spirit. It is the spirit of lawful behavior. It's the spirit of our Constitution of Minnesota. Our Constitution calls for the security and the protection of the people, the benefit of the people. And that wasn't happening. We have the chance to go forward in 1 month and build bridges with every neighborhood and every community in Minnesota. Because this is not a Minneapolis problem. The lawlessness that has poisoned our state has leaked out like water through our fingers across the cities and the farms and the mines and the buildings of all over Minnesota. This is what's happened. So it's with immense gratitude that I say thank you to our peacekeepers. Thank you to our policewomen and policemen. And I appreciate your being here. But this should signify a new day. There will be a day where the 3rd Precinct building stands tall and erect once again. And people will know that lawful behavior will be honored, and that we need to elevate the work of the cops. We need to triple the number of cops we have in Minneapolis. We need to recognize without question that a restorative justice program has to be a part of the equation. Imprisoning repeat violent felons has to be a part of the deterrent process. We need to have mandated minimum sentence mean just that. We need to screen and appoint judges who will uphold sentences. Quite frankly, we need to come alongside of women. And for those crimes where women are being targeted, we need to make harsher penalties. And lastly, judges need to follow guidelines, and they need to be called out when they don't. That's what we're about here today. So again, I say thank you for being here. Thank you to the MPPOA for their steadfast commitment to their mission. This is all about building bridges, building community, and restoring safety once again. We're going to take back our streets, and the police are going to know that they've got a governor who's got their back. The police and the MPPOA specifically are going to be at the table as we choose the leaders going forward that are going to help lead the charge to regain lawful behavior in Minnesota. I want to say thanks again to Brian Peters and Dave Titus and the MPPOA Board of Directors as they've gone through the process of reviewing what needs to happen in Minnesota in November. I'm here for you. I promise you, I've got your back. Thank you for being here. I'll be glad to stand for some questions.
Did you say
Yes.
triple the police in Minneapolis? Because that would be like 2 times the authorized force, and they can't even hit the authorized force right now. Like that would be like 1,800.
It depends upon how you count the police right now, but in terms of active police on the streets, I think Dave Titus or Brian Peters might be able to, but I read recently there were about 450 to 500 active people on the streets, and I think there were studies done in 2019, 2018 that reflect we probably should be closer to 13 to 1,400. Those numbers might be a little bit off.
And who should pay? Should the state weigh in and help fund it?
I think the state can do a variety of things, but I think each city has to do what they do. This is not a time for a governor to come in and act like an emperor. This is a time to work with the leaders, say, how can we help you best? But I think we've got an issue of trying to replace, we have to hold on to the police that are working right now. We need to retain them, but we have to find an effective way to recruit police as well. And I think that may well involve, we may have to go to police that have retired and say, we need you back. But I'm going to leave that up to the experts. I'm going to leave that up to the MPPOA board. We're going to work alongside of them. There's no reason for a governor to act like he knows more or less than he does. You got to work with the people you work with. You've got to select your leaders. You've got to select your commissioner, and you got to put the right people in their places. And when you have them in their places, you need to make certain that you're listening to them. Other questions? Excuse me, Brian Peters? Oh, would you be willing to answer a question? Yeah, Brian Peters.
This is your second endorsement in this race. Can you tell us what left him short last time and what got over the top this time?
We're here to support Dr. Jensen today for our next governor. That's all I have to say about that. We've met with him, we've spoken with him, we've had many in-depth conversations, and from our perspective, he is the person to lead the next generation of our members and our cops. Again, we have very serious problems to fix, and we need serious people that are willing to do that. We believe that is Dr. Scott Jensen.
Can you talk a little bit about your screening process? You've endorsed a Democrat in a congressional seat as well. What do you look for in candidates, and how do you kind of figure out who you're going to be?
Well, that's up to the board of directors. The board of directors ultimately is the body that approves, but we bring in candidates. We have a screening questionnaire. Like I said earlier, with Dr. Jensen, we've met several times. I met with him probably 3 or 4 times for breakfast, even before the GOP convention. So it's getting to know each other and understanding what their priorities are and how they're going to go about doing that.
Can we expect more endorsements in some other congressional races potentially, or other big races this year?
Potentially.
Right, Dr. Jensen was talking about the staffing shortages and recruitment troubles. You've got departments across the state offering incentives, trying different training programs, and it just suburban, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Metro Transit, like nobody can hire enough cops. What do you think would be the most effective change? Like what might actually work to help departments get to where they need to be?
Well, it's certainly going to change by stopping the rhetoric of some of our current leadership. And I think that when Dr. Jensen is elected, that's a signal. And it's a signal that I think is going to help get people back into this profession. And this is a statewide problem, and it's a big problem. And we're certainly going to be working with him and other leaders to solve the recruiting and retention issues.
Are you seeing from your vantage point kind of statewide any of the specific policies working or making a difference, whether it's hiring bonuses or some of the, covering tuition, like training, that sort of thing?
I think the hiring bonuses and pay right now may be keeping people that are already in the profession there. But what a major problem is we don't have people going and signing up and going to school to get into this profession. And so we need to do something very serious to get people back into wanting to become a police or peace officer.
Senator, you were still in office when the police package was passed in the summer of 2020 following that George Floyd incident. Do you remember how you voted and what led into your decision there?
I don't recall the specifics of the bill. I'd have to review that bill.
It was the one dealing with use of force and extra training and that type of thing.
Yeah, that was in the middle of COVID, and I don't remember the specifics, Brian, sorry. Folks, I'm going to close with just saying this. What you just heard from Brian Peters was leadership. You asked him a question, and he said, you know how we're going to solve this problem? We're going to dispense with the rhetoric. I think that's leadership, and I want to say thank you again to Dave Titus, the president of the board, and to Brian Peters, the executive director. And I want to remind you of just a few words from Teddy Roosevelt a long time ago. As we go forward and as we build bridges and as we restore neighborhoods, we're going to end up saying this: the credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly. These folks who stand behind me, these are the folks who put their lives on the line. These are the folks who recognize the common sense that's necessary in order for us to restore lawful behavior, restore the safety on our streets, and if you will, allow us to live normally and reach out to one another. It's important that you're here, but it's even more important that we recognize that if you look at the definition of valor, I think it's important to recognize that valor is defined as strength of mind or spirit that enables a person to encounter danger. I can't help but think that that's a perfect word to close this press conference as we honor the work police do. These people are valorous, and we need to respect the work they do. Minneapolis has already spoken. They want the police at their side to rebuild community. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good day. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks again.